Men today are searching for strength, leadership, and purpose in hopes of achieving greatness, but too many of them are looking in the wrong places. Andrew Tate presents a version of masculinity that's all about dominance, materialism, and self-serving ambition. That is not what real men are called to be. So what does real masculinity look like? It's not about weakness, and we should never fall into that trap. But it's also not about aggression. It's about being grounded in faith, authentic in action, and purposeful in pursuit. In this episode specifically, I'm going to be breaking down why Andrew Tate's message is misleading and how you can close the gap and step into the true greatness that God has created you for. What's up, everybody? It's Ryan James Miller back with another episode of Unlocking Greatness. And today I'm talking Andrew Tate. Or really, today I'm talking about the destruction that Andrew Tate has created and something so much greater that is in store for us that seek in the right direction. Look, it is no doubt that Andrew Tate's influence is undeniable. Millions and millions of young men, his G's he calls them, look up to him. But there's a serious problem with him. Really, 3 problems that I want to talk about. And don't worry, I'm not just going to bash on Andrew Tate today. I actually have an opportunity for you to step into your own greatness. I'm going to walk you through 4 specific things that I think are going to be really helpful. So just sit tight. And I'm also going to offer you an opportunity to assess yourself to see where you're at in this whole situation. So again, sit tight, buckle up. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. So let's talk first about why Andrew Tate's message is so destructive and it's so harmful, and why the millions of men that are following him are perpetuating a disaster of toxic masculinity. By the way, that word, that phrase, toxic masculinity, is something that I don't often like because it has been ascribed to every type of masculinity. Anytime a man steps up, anytime a man exercises strength, they're just called toxic. Anytime a man believes that he's called to be the head of his household, he's called toxic. And I hate that. But there is true toxic masculinity, and Andrew Tate's picture is on the cover of that book. So, 3 things that I really see as problems as it relates to Tate, and things that I would encourage you to consider for yourself. Number 1, he absolutely promotes toxic masculinity. Definitely not a biblical version of masculinity. Andrew Tate, he equates strength with dominance. He talks about lording over his people. He has women underneath him. By the way, hundreds of them at times, at least to what he admits. And he says he slept with thousands of women. He lords over them. He wants to be the top G. He's literally looking for kingship of the kingdom that he has created for himself. But that is not what biblical strength is. Biblical strength is about being grounded in faith, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. But a real man does not chase power for his own gain. He builds an unshakable faith in order to create an incredible life for himself and those around him. You have to see here that what he is doing is he is trying to build an empire for himself. He wants to attain more money, more material things. He wants more people to follow him. He is trying to create a movement of men that will lord over others around them. And that is so incredibly dangerous, and we must run from that. 2, he undermines healthy relationships. I alluded to this in that last point, but Andrew Tate is notorious for living in toxic, destructive relationships and promoting them, particularly as it relates to women. He sees them as objects. You know, whether or not the accusations result in criminal prosecution, it is no surprise at all to hear that he has slept with and manipulated hundreds, if not thousands, of women. And the accusations that have been made about him, there's just too many to not have some truth to them. And again, Hopefully, if he actually has committed crimes, he will be found guilty of them eventually. But we must see that he is destroying women. He is belittling them. He is putting them in their place, as he says it. He sees men as superior to women. And that is not at all how God sees women. That is not at all how God sees anybody. God does not have an order of superiority. Even inside of biblical complementarianism, you can look that term up, which is something that I ascribe to. While God calls the man to be the head of the household, he in no way is saying that man is morally superior, that he is of greater importance, of greater value, or of greater worth. He says to the man and to the woman, I have created you in my image with equal worth and equal value. The value and worth that we have is found in our Creator and the sacrifice he made for us on the cross. Tate is doing the exact opposite. He is saying that as a man, because he is physically strong, he therefore has superiority over women. On top of that, because he has made a bunch of money, because he has accumulated a bunch of stuff, because he has a lot of followers, he therefore is superior to others, and he will constantly belittle other people. That is no way to live your life, and that is no way to model manhood in society today. We want to make sure that we understand manhood as being authentic in action. This is the second step of closing the gap, which I'll share a little bit more in a minute. But authenticity, part of that means that we're treating our relationships with integrity, with honesty, with kindness, whether that's our wife, our kids, or our brothers or sisters in Christ. That is something that Tate does so poorly, if not at all. He doesn't even have a wife. We have to be so careful here when we're following men like this, because they are leading us to destroy the people around us. And finally, when it comes to success, by the way, the true definition of success is the achievement of an end or a purpose. But Tate defines success as the accumulation of money and status. The more money, the more status, the more stuff you have, the more successful you are. That is not at all what success means. That is not at all what true success really is. Now, that does not mean that we can't desire to earn more money or more success, which I'll share again in a little bit. But what it does mean is that is not the end. Our chief end is not to accumulate stuff. Our chief end is to glorify God and to serve and support those around us. A man of greatness is purposeful in pursuit. That's the third step in closing the gap, which again, I'll open up a little bit more to in a minute. Real men don't seek out success for themselves. Real men, purpose-driven men, know that money is a tool, not a measure of worth. I am not valuable because of what I have. I am valuable because of what somebody has done for me. That being God. And therefore, anything that I gain is a gift from him and an opportunity to give to other people. But that's not what Andrew Tate's doing. And the problem with all of this is eventually you are going to find yourself, if you follow Tate's model, with ruined relationships and with a hollow sense of who you are. Some of you have heard me share this story before, but I just want to reiterate or remind some of you and then introduce the story to others of you that may be listening to this for the first time. August 10th, 2006, I woke up in a hotel room by myself in Chicago, Illinois, with a horrific emptiness inside of me. You see, externally, I was successful. At that time, I was 28 years old. I was making six figures, which almost 20 years ago, that was a lot of money. I owned a home in a very affluent area in Southern California. I had a beautiful wife. I had a young child. My wife was driving a Mercedes. I was driving a really dope truck. We had all kinds of cool toys. But I woke up empty because the night before I nearly destroyed my entire life. See, my wife and I had been in a challenging season. We were arguing more than we had ever before over a variety of little things. We couldn't seem to come to agreements. We weren't communicating appropriately and properly. I was starting to destroy that relationship. I was starting to destroy my relationship with my child as a result of that. And as all of those things built, I nearly threw it all away by sleeping with another woman. And by God's grace, I did not do that, though I didn't even know God at that point. But you see, I was chasing a similar version of masculinity. I was no Andrew Tate. And I want to say that I had some sense of morality about me that he does not seem to have any of. But I was chasing the world's definition of success. And it was giving me nothing inside. And I believe that there is somebody out there right now listening to this or watching this, that you feel the same way. Maybe you look at your bank account, you look at your home, your car, maybe you're sitting in your office right now, thinking and reflecting on this amazing business that you've built, and you just feel hollow. You feel empty. And you don't know what to do with yourself. I want to encourage you to consider that maybe you have been pursuing the wrong type of masculinity, the wrong type of manhood, the wrong type of success. And maybe it wasn't Andrew Tate's influence. Maybe it was some other influencer out there, some book you read, some group of guys that you got into. But it was the same version. It was the same idea. You know, I never wanted to manipulate women. I never saw them as objects, even though I can admit that at times I definitely treated them that way. But I was raised by a single mom, and I saw the value of women, and I respected women as best as I could at that point in my life. So again, I wasn't like Andrew Tate in that way, but in others I was. And I think to all the men that are out there following him right now, I just pray to God that their eyes would be open before they destroy their life in the same way that my eyes were opened before I destroyed mine. The good news is, you guys, is there is a solution out there. There is an opportunity for you like there was for me. Because I don't just want to talk about a problem. I want to talk about a solution. Because if Andrew Tate's message leads to destruction, which I have proposed and deeply believe, then we need to understand how we construct an appropriate masculinity. How do we build real masculinity in a society that is so desperate for real men to step up and live out the role that God has called them to? Well, that is a big part of this idea of closing the gap. And so I want to walk through these 3 steps to closing the gap. And then fourth, I want to introduce to you these 5 pillars of greatness that I believe will be wonderful measuring sticks for you as you try to pursue the calling that God has on your life. So, number 1, solve this problem, to push back against the toxic masculinity that Andrew Tate is perpetuating and all of his G's, we need to start off by being grounded in faith. That's the first step of closing the gap between who we are and ultimately who God has called us to be, is we must be grounded in faith. A man who is grounded in faith doesn't chase validation. He already knows his worth, because his worth is in Christ and Christ alone. You see, for me, when I look back on my life in the first 28 years of my life, if you read my book, you'll be able to understand this story better. I'll put a link in the show notes if you want to grab a copy of that. But up to that point in my life, all of my worth and value was based upon status and success. You see, I didn't have a lot for a long time. I felt somewhat abandoned by my dad, though I had an on and off again relationship with him up to that point in my life. And so I was constantly trying to prove my worth to others. And the way that I felt like I could do that was by making money, buying stuff, sleeping around until I got married, and then just talking about my just how amazing my wife was and how I landed her and how she deserved me. I don't even know if I ever really used that language, but you get the idea. None of that truly defined me. It did in the moment, but it wasn't real. You see, I started to understand my true worth when I realized that that was all emptiness. I started to realize my worth when I heard preached to me for the first time ever that while I was in the muck, the mire, the sin, the struggle, that there was a God out there that loved me anyway, that sent his son to the cross to die on my behalf, to redeem me for all of eternity and ultimately restore me to who God originally created me to be. That's greatness. It began by stepping into church on August 13th, 2006, and hearing that message preached. But to stay grounded in faith for the last 18 years, requires me to daily be in conversation with the Lord through prayer, to be reading and receiving of his word by opening up the Bible, and to do the very best I can to be obedient to what he calls me to do, to who he calls me to be. That's how I stay grounded in faith. And finally, to be surrounded by other brothers and sisters that are pointing me to him as ultimate authority, that are reminding me that he is the rock I stand on, that he is the foundation for me. So my question for you is, are you building your life on rock or sand? Are you building your life on money, wealth, status, power, influence, title? That's sand. It's going to erode. I know you've already felt it. And you've been ignoring the signs, but it's just going to get worse. Or are you building your life on the rock, who is Christ, who came, saw, and conquered this earth so you and I could have an eternal and abundant life? That's how we stay grounded in faith. Number 2, as it relates to closing the gap, is about being authentic in action. Authentic in action means that real masculinity is not performative. It's about character. It's not about how we show off. It's about how we live it out. The Bible has a wonderful definition of what it means to be of good character. The Bible calls us to be fruitful. This is something that we find in Galatians chapter 5. There are 9 characteristics of the fruit of the Spirit. These are not independent fruits, but one fruit with 9 characteristics that we as men need to strive for if we are to be authentic in our action. We are to love. This is a selfless, sacrificial, Christ-like love. We are to have joy. This is deep-seated gladness that is not dependent on circumstances. We must have peace. This is an inner tranquility and a trust in God, even in the most difficult of circumstances. We need to have patience. This is an endurance and a perseverance in trials and in dealing with other people. We need to have kindness. We need to show kindness. This is a compassion and a desire to do good to others. Goodness. This is moral integrity in doing what is right before the Lord at all times and in all places with all people. Faithfulness. This is a loyalty and steadfastness in our relationship with God and with other people. Gentleness is about self-control, about having strength under control, being humble and having a tender spirit. And finally, self-control is mastery over sinful desires and other emotions. We need to be able to control ourselves and not fly off the handle too quickly. So as I've been talking about this idea of authentic action, my question for you is this: what do others say about you? At home? At work? In the community? My challenge to you here is to take inventory of how others think of you. Would they describe you with one of or more of these 9 traits? There could be other things as well, but which ones do you think, if they said of these 9, which ones do you think I'm really amazing at, and which ones do you think I struggle the most with? What would people say? What would the closest people to you say about you in this regard? But it doesn't just stop at being authentic in action, because the final step in closing the gap is about being purposeful in pursuit. Because we start grounded in our faith, we live out authenticity in our action, and then finally, we must make all of our pursuit purposeful. Masculinity is not about coasting. It's about using your gifts to fulfill God's calling in your life. Too often, and I think this is actually a big problem in Christianity, is there is not enough drive and determination. And a big part of that is because the message of the gospel is that Christ came and did for us, that it wasn't of our doing, but of his. That's Ephesians chapter 2. That's true. But there is also plenty of times in Scripture when we see the Apostle Paul in particular talking about working out his faith, striving. You feel this desire that he has to work his tail off. He was a tent maker by trade. He was a disciple maker. He was going from town to town through the grueling desert, through all of the elements, getting beaten, stoned, nearly to death, shipwrecked, all for the sake of the calling that God had on his life, which was to share the gospel. But there was also never a time that we saw, that at least we can see directly from Scripture, where he stopped being a tent maker either. So whether he was taking offering from the churches that he was putting work into, and or he was also building tents, Paul never rested. I mean, he rested, but in the times that he was called to work, he worked hard. And that's what we must do too. We must understand what our purpose is, and then we must pursue it with all of our heart. So many men are trying to figure out what that end is, what that aim is, what that purpose is. And so when you hear a guy like Andrew Tate talk about aspiring to all these amazing looking things or amazing feeling things, that's what gets guys excited. They don't want to coast. We've been wired for great things. We've been wired to work hard. We've been wired to get our hands dirty. And I'm telling you that the Bible, that God himself is definitely communicating to you that there is no coasting available. That when you need to rest, you rest in him. Yes, get your 7 or 8 hours sleep a night. But get up every day and be purposeful and intentional about giving it all for the sake of that purpose. Real men leave it all on the battlefield. My encouragement to you is to work hard, to invest in others, to use your influence to make a difference in the world around you. More than anything, don't waste your life. I think one of the most tragic things that I could possibly ever think to happen in my life was to get to my last day knowing that I was about to take my last breath, and to for a moment think to myself that I left some energy in the tank, that I didn't do everything I could to fulfill the purpose that God had called me to. I bet you feel that way. I bet you feel right now that there are things that are untapped in your life. This isn't about doing more for the sake of doing more. This isn't about hustle culture. This is about understanding what your purpose is and giving it all to that purpose. So my challenge to you would be to consider one area of your life that you can step up and take more responsibility in. Look at masculinity is not about control. It's about calling. And every man listening right now has a calling from God. Okay, so then what is the target? And by the way, I want to take a pause here. If you are a female and you are listening to this point in this episode, you're watching to this point in this video, I would encourage you to continue. This is not to hold this high over the head of the man that you love, but it is to encourage them to walk in a manner worthy of the calling that God has on their life. It's to lovingly encourage them to listen to content like this, to subscribe to my channel or to my podcast or to follow me on social media, because I want to encourage them to be the best husbands and fathers they can for your family. Maybe you're a single lady and you're aspiring to find a great man in your life. These are the things you need to look to. Because while you want them to be able to financially provide for you, that's a very small fraction of what it means to be a man and a provider. Okay, let's move on to this last component here, because I think that at least for me, I know that there's this gap that I'm in between who God created me as and who God's created me to be. And I get unsettled. I want to strive for more, but it's hard because what are the metrics for success? What are the metrics for greatness as a man? If it's $1 million a year, which would be an amazing income, then I just need to ascribe to make that much money or desire to make that much money. And if I can do that, then I'm good. But that's not a definition of success as a man at all. So what is it? And it's not just about money. And a lot of these things, it's hard to measure them because there's not clear KPIs. There's not key measurements. But we've come up with some that I think are going to be extremely helpful for you as you continue striving to do the very best you can as a man. We call these the 5 pillars of greatness. So you want to close down that gap. You want to achieve more. You want to become greater. Here are 5 areas that I believe you should focus on. Many people talk about these things, but inside of these, there's some specific things that I believe that you should aim for. And by the way, we have an assessment that I will put down in the show notes in each of these 5 areas, and then it will provide you a helpful action guide in the area that you score the lowest. So we'll share that action guide with you so you can take some action steps in that area that you need to focus the most on. Okay, so let's just work through these. This is going to be kind of quick because I don't want to have you here forever, but I think these are helpful. So the 5 pillars of greatness. Number 1, kingdom foundation. That's your faith. I said this before, I'll say it again. A man rooted in God stands unshaken. A couple of keys to having a solid, strong, great kingdom foundation include faith being the cornerstone of every bit of your life, making sure that you have a strong relationship with God that provides clarity, peace, and purpose, and ensuring that your daily disciplines include prayer, scripture, and obedience to what God calls you to in order to stay aligned with God's vision. So that's the kingdom foundation. Number 2, pillar number 2 is about covenant connections. These are your relationships as a husband, as a father, as a friend, as a son, as a community member, a church member, whatever that may be. Your greatest legacy is built through the people that you love and lead, not the empire that you build for yourself. You see, to achieve greatness in your covenant connections, you lead with integrity as a husband, a father, a friend, a mentor, all of those. You have strong relationships, which means you intentionally invest into them. You intentionally communicate and you intentionally sacrifice yourself for other people. Brotherhood and accountability creates this strength needed to walk the path of greatness, No matter what anybody has told you, you cannot do it on your own, which is why we have the Men of Greatness community. We meet together live and in person in Orange County, California, the fourth Tuesday of every month. We have in-person quarterly intensives where guys come in to just go to war with themselves and come out better than they got here in the morning. You can learn more about all of that at coach.ryanjamesmiller.com/MOG. But brotherhood and accountability are going to be incredibly important in that covenant connection, really in all areas of your life, but specifically that. The third pillar of greatness is peak health. This is physical, emotional, and mental. Your body and your mind are tools for the mission that you are on, which means you have to steward them well. It blows me away to see how many men that are aspiring to, or maybe even have built successful businesses and are totally out of shape. They may not even look out of shape. They just may be out of shape internally. They're a stress case. They're anxious all the time. They're going to die far too young because they've burned themselves to the ground. Peak health. This means that your physical, emotional, and mental strengths are empowering you to endure challenges and lead well, because you're going to have a lot of challenges and you're going to be called on to lead well in a lot of situations. A great man disciplines himself in fitness, nutrition, rest, and emotional regulation. If you're not a gym guy, get out and walk every single day. Put a little bit of weight on your back, wear a weight vest, put some weight in a backpack, and go walk and make sure you're getting your 10,000 steps a day. Be considerate of what you're putting into your body. Limit your alcohol consumption. Don't eat a bunch of garbage all of the time. And when it comes to your emotional well-being, you can't take it all on your own. You need to work through the emotional challenges with others and experience the range of emotions: happiness, sadness, anger, frustration, all of them. But you need to do that in a healthy manner. Mastering health ensures long-term viability, vitality, and it creates a sharpness and a focusedness of your mind. And that's what we're after. We want to be on our A game at all times. If you're not in peak health, you can't do that. The fourth pillar of greatness is kingdom stewardship. This is about your money. Your resources are meant for impact, not just accumulation. Money is a tool. It can't be a master. It was never intended to be that way. God calls men to steward our finances well. And that looks different for each of us. For some of you, it's giving it all away. For some of you, it's investing into different things that will leave a longer-term legacy for a family or for an organization. For others of you, it's to build a large business, to serve a large group of people, to employ a lot of people and pay them well. Again, to each their own, but you need to be wise and you need to seek the Lord for what that is. A great man leads his family in financial responsibility, generosity, and wealth building. If you have children and you are not raising them to first give of what they earn back to the Lord, you have failed as a father. That is as direct as I can possibly be. You've got to encourage them to give to others, to serve other people with their money. It's not about hoarding. You can't take it with you. And while, yes, it is wise to create investment vehicles, to leave to others, I believe the Lord would far rather see you give away what you have now to those that are in need than store it up and have no idea where it's going to go after you're gone. Financial discipline, by the way, allows for greater freedom, impact, and legacy building. This is an area where we can all grow in, but this is definitely an area that I know I can grow in. And I've made some poor financial decisions in my past that led to a lot of destruction. I lost my house. I lost all the toys. I believe part of that was judgment from the Lord, which was good. It taught me a lot of lessons and allowed me to not repeat some of the same mistakes that I made previously. And the fifth pillar of greatness is around purpose-driven leadership. This is about our business. This is about our career. We must see our work as a calling, not just a paycheck. And you may be saying to yourself, well, I don't really feel purposeful in my work. Like I just do X, Y, Z, whatever. I would say to you that work is a calling, but that calling is different for every man. For some of us, like I believe me, my calling is in my work. I believe I've been called to help lead other men just like you into the greatness that they've been created for. I also believe that I've been called to help organizations in good and God-honoring ways generate more revenue, generate more income, and serve more people by consulting and coaching them in their the sales side of their organization. So I believe that it's a direct calling. But whether or not that was even the case, the other part of the calling that I have by going to work every day is to go earn a paycheck so I can serve my family. See, it's not the paycheck, it's what I do with it, which is my opportunity to serve my family, to provide for my family, to protect my family and keep a roof over their head. That's calling too. It's not just about feeling good about the work I do. As a matter of fact, I may not feel good about the work I do. I don't feel good about the work I do every single day, and I feel like I've been called to it. A man of greatness leads with excellence, with vision and integrity in his possession or in his profession. And you can do that whether you own the business or not. This man should allow his work to reflect his values, to create impact, and to provide for your family, as I said earlier. Leadership is about service. Use your influence to lift others up and glorify God. I love when I see people that are lifting others up as they are lifted up. It is just an incredible sight to see in the business world when that's happening. As a matter of fact, I want to share one quick story before we get ready to land this plane. A good friend of mine, and by the way, I'm gonna remind you of a couple of things that we have to give away to you, so don't go anywhere. But this idea of using your influence to uplift others, one of the ways I've seen this exampled best is in one of my good friends, John Reed. So John and I met about 4 years ago. I ended up having him on my podcast, and I literally fell in love with him. I fell in love with him because he is a restaurateur. He owns a couple of different restaurants, multiple locations. You've probably seen, if you've followed me on social media, me tag or go to Boss Cat Kitchen and Libations or 10 Sushi and Cocktails, two incredible restaurants that John has created along with his partner, Leslie. One of the coolest things, though, that John and Leslie have done is that as they have opened new locations, they have raised up employees from the inside, from server to manager. And then when they excel in their roles as manager, when they're demonstrating these characteristics of leadership, as they prepare to open a new location, they offer to some of these managers the opportunity to run that new location, but also to share in the ownership. It's an incredible way to reward them for their hard work, but it's also an incredible example of using your leadership and your influence. Like, John could take all that success for himself. He doesn't have to give away any ownership, but he sees this as an opportunity to lift others up. And he also knows that in lifting others up, they're going to do the same for other people, which is going to build a greater business. I find few better examples in business than my friend John doing that. And I'm so proud to call him a friend because of that. What about you? You've listened to this. You've heard me talk about the evil wickedness of Andrew Tate, of that entire narrative of toxicity that exists in the masculine narrative, that there's others that are perpetuating and propagating that same garbage. And right now you may be thinking to yourself, holy smokes, I've bought into some of that. Maybe not the whole thing. Maybe you're not a subscriber to Andrew Tate's stuff, but maybe you get excited when he talks about some of the things that he does. Or maybe you've heard another man get really fired up about building an empire and lording over other people, even if they didn't quite use that language, but something was unsettling to you and you're at a crossroads. Well, you have a decision to make. Are you going to chase the world's version of success Or are you going to close the gap and choose to build a legacy that lasts eternally? If you want to take real action, it's yours for the taking. I have resources available for you. You can go to our website and grab some of those resources. You can look at the links and links down in the description below. You can download a free copy of our workbook. That's a tool that you can use to go through the greatness framework yourself. You can take our assessment and receive an action guide that will help you strengthen you in one of the areas that you are weakest in, of those 5 pillars of greatness. You can attend an intensive. You can join our community. There's many, many ways. And if not me, then somebody else. But you need to find a home. You need to find a space and a place where other men are encouraging you to pursue the calling that God has on your life. One that is grounded in faith, authentic in action, and purposeful in pursuit. That is, in a God-honoring way, pursuing those 5 pillars. You see, the world does not need another Andrew Tate. And God forgive me for saying we don't even need the one that we have. Our world needs more men of faith, more men of honor, and more men of purpose. Gandhi says, be the change that you want to see in the world. If you want to see the world change, if we want to see the world change, we have to start by changing ourselves. Right now, as you finish off this video, this episode, I'm going to challenge you to write down your commitment. What is your commitment to taking one step to become the man and that you are created to be? You can check out other videos on our channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can follow me on social media, subscribe, share this episode with other men that you believe need this type of movement, a God-honoring movement that is pushing back against the evil in this world and elevating the good that will ultimately recreate the world that God intended for it to be in the first place. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you deeply. Now go out and be the men of greatness that God has called you to.